You know, I often base my opinions and my segments off of mainstream news sources that are certified by a third party because what else can we really do? Now, I try to read through these stories, fact check them, and add an extra layer of scrutiny on top. Just because they're mainstream news doesn't mean they're always correct. And now we are faced with a real conundrum. It seems CNN may have actually fallen for the text hoax and for some reason believed it was real. Or maybe a source they had thought it was real. But let me back up. This morning, I did a segment talking about this viral text message that claimed Donald Trump was going to invoke the Stafford Act and he was going to hard quarantine all Americans for 2 weeks. So you better go get your supplies now. It was not true. It was a stupid viral hoax. But for some reason, people eat this stuff up. And I do not believe journalists are exempt from falling for stupid hoaxes. The Daily Caller now reports White House denies report about potential national curfew. No discussions taking place. I don't know if this is the exact same story, but it sounds so similar. National curfew. No, it's not true. But the CDC did recommend people stay home and don't do these gatherings larger than 50. You know what I think might have happened? Because I mentioned this in the other segment. I think somebody working with the government said something to a journalist, and it's a game of telephone. But what you need to realize is that when these mishaps happen, it gives you a glimpse into how bad the media really is. These are people, they don't know any more than you do. They talked to their buddy who works in the government who told them something, and they believed it was true, and they report it as fact, but it's not necessarily a fact. It is an unconfirmed rumor. They say, anonymous sources say X will happen. Just because a source said it doesn't mean it's true. This is the craziest thing about how the press works today. Here's the example I give. I could make a story saying Donald Trump plans to invoke national curfew, says source. And the source is a guy in the alley who's, drunk and sitting on the curb. And he's, a homeless guy ranting about aliens. Well, but a source said, yeah, it's important sometimes we know who those sources are, but we can't always do that. I get it. But just because a source said it doesn't make it true. The caller reports. The White House is pushing back on Monday reporting from CNN claiming the administration is discussing a national curfew to combat the spread of coronavirus. CNN originally reported that the curfew would encourage businesses to close at a certain time each night. Yet Katie Miller, press secretary to Vice President Mike Pence, told the Daily Caller that, quote, there are no discussions taking place about a curfew. Betsy Klein tweeted, new with Barbara Starr, CNN. There are active discussions within the Trump administration to encourage a possible curfew across the nation in which non-essential businesses would have to close by a certain time each night. According to an administration official and another source familiar, Miller told PBS that the immediate pushback was to stop bad information from spreading. They love to criticize independent commentary, YouTube channels, social media personalities for spreading bad information. They claim it's the rise of this, which has given way to fake news. Yet they do the exact same thing. Oh, but someone told me it's true. White House Deputy Press Secretary Judd Deere additionally told the Daily Caller that the story is flat out not correct. Yamiche Alcindor, Katie Miller from the Vice President's office, is stressing there is no talk of a national curfew and no talk of domestic travel restrictions. I don't want bad information out there to scare people, she said. Both Deere and Miller actively disputed CNN's report on Twitter. I'm going to tell you right now. I was reading CNN and they mentioned potential domestic travel restrictions. And if that's not true, well, then I think we've all been taken for a ride. And it's thanks to CNN for putting out bad information. Katie Miller is tweeting it's not correct. And then we see Judd Deere also saying it's not correct. The White House's denial comes shortly after it was revealed that the Department of Health and Human Services was subject to of a cyber attack over the weekend. As a result, the White House National Security Council shot down false information circulating on social media of the White House's plan to institute a national quarantine. Vice President Mike Pence told reporters Sunday to expect the coronavirus task force to roll out new recommendations for the public on social distancing on Monday. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the top National Institutes of Health official on the task force, added that the recommendation would look like what is currently going on in European countries that have not been mandated national quarantines, namely the shuttering of restaurants, bars, and other social gathering locations. There's some weird punctuation here. Surgeon General Jerome Adams said Monday that there's every chance the United States could end up like Italy if people do not start taking social distancing seriously. We are where Italy was 2 weeks ago in terms of our numbers. And we have a choice to make as a nation, he said during a Fox News interview. Do we want to go the direction of South Korea and be really aggressive and lower our mortality rates? Or do we want to go the direction of Italy? Well, as I mentioned this morning, I want to give you the update from the NSC directly. We can see the National Security Council tweeted text message rumors of a national quarantine are fake. There is no national lockdown. CDC Gov has and will continue to post the latest guidance. So here's what CNN is reporting now. I'm not sure if this is the same story. They say it was updated. And I believe this story may be the actual story, but changed. And what I love about this is it says updated, but let me just check if there's an editor's note at the bottom explaining what they changed. No, there isn't. Is there a correction? Let's do a quick search for the word correction. There is not. Is there editor's note? Is there really an editor's note? There is no editor's note. So this is the big problem I have with media. It didn't used to be this way in newspapers, that if they wrote a story, they couldn't change it. It was hard printed. It would be out the next day. They'd have to issue that correction. Now, as the saying goes, the lie travels halfway around the world before the truth can strap on his boots. So as soon as they publish the story saying that, there's going to be a national lockdown or a curfew, everyone goes nuts. Text messages go wild. And then once they finally get a statement, they say, walk it back. But where's the correction, CNN? Where's the update? Why do I have to rely on Trump supporters like Mike Cernovich to document these changes? I shouldn't have to do that. But sure enough, yes, it was not in this story. I don't think so. But there was a certain story that Cernovich actually took a screenshot of before and after. Why should that be the case? Shouldn't CNN say, here was the previously reported story and here are the changes we made? Because a lot of outlets do this. At a time where we're facing a national crisis, we can't rely on the media, yet they want to politicize this. They come out and say, we can't rely on the president. We've got more in government than just the president. We have many different officials, many different agencies from local, state to federal. So sure, criticize the president, criticize the government officials, but there's many, many different people. The problem with the media is that they're the ones supposed to be providing the information, and even they aren't getting it right. So you live in a glass house, don't throw stones. That being said, here's the updated story and what they're saying now. The Trump administration officials are actively weighing steps that would more explicitly push Americans to distance themselves from one another in a bid to prevent further coronavirus contagion. Speaking at the White House on Sunday, Vice President Mike Pence said additional broad-based recommendations for the American public would be released on Monday morning. He and other officials declined to specify what might be included in the guidelines, but he was responding to a question about potential nationwide closures of places like restaurants and bars. As the virus continues to spread into more American communities, discussions have accelerated on ways to encourage or require people to remain in place while health officials work to contain the disease. So far, members of the White House Coronavirus Task Force are split on whether further restrictions like limits on domestic travel or even some type of national lockdown are necessary at the federal level. So I bring this up because even though we have hard denials, it seems like CNN, even with their update, is still maintaining the narrative that members of the members of the White House Task Force, I'm getting ahead of myself, are still split on whether there should be restrictions or a national lockdown. So let me explain to you one of the ways they get away with these weasel words. Let's say there's a group of people sitting down and one guy says, you hear what they're doing in Europe? They're doing these hard quarantines, like shutting down all these businesses. Then someone on the Trump team says, we definitely shouldn't do that. That is not America. We probably can't even enforce that. That's a terrible thing that, and we'll never have that come here. Then someone, a journalist overhears it and they say discussions were had about whether they should lock down all businesses or put a curfew in place. Technically the truth. The media, you then see all these other outlets start regurgitating it. So let me tell you something that I walked into earlier today. A bunch of people are saying that there was a hard mandatory curfew in New Jersey. It is a curfew. They're calling it a strongly suggested one, meaning they can't really enforce it. And that's what I thought. But what happens is the initial report says the governor has instituted a curfew that is strongly recommended. And so it's kind of like, what does that even really mean? Another news outlet saw it and clipped the quote to say they have instituted a curfew as per, USA Today. Then another story says it and says there is a hard curfew in effect. And this laundering of information cycles around until no one has any idea what's going on. Because CNN says something like this, members of the White House are discussing a national, whether or not a national lockdown would make sense. Some other news outlet's going to take that and say that Trump is discussing it, people are going to go wild and you are going to make panic happen. The media response to everything has been completely irresponsible. And look, I will absolutely take criticism. I don't think I'm perfect. I'm trying to do my best. And as you know, I have serious criticisms for the media. That's the point of this segment. I don't know if we can trust CNN at this point, and I don't know if we can trust the Daily Caller at this point. I don't know if we can trust the government officials, and therein lies the serious problem. No, I don't trust the government. I rarely, if ever, do. And now I can't even trust the media. I don't know what to tell you. The best I can do is just use the media sources as they exist and hope that the more mainstream sources are legit. Whatever, man. But you should take everything with a grain of salt, even if it comes from me. I'll leave it there. Stick around. I got a couple more segments in just a few minutes. I will see you all shortly.